You rebuilt Lovable 3 times from scratch. How did that happen?
AI makes it quicker to create things. It also empowers you to delete and rebuild.
What would you tell to these people who are under these expectations or limiting beliefs of our society?
I think if you're working in tech and if you're building something digitally, especially now with AI, you can basically start and do anything. Like more or less, there's zero limit.
So today I have Nad, who is head of design at Lovable. Hello, Nad, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And today we are sitting here in a very nice building at Hatch conference, actually, which is taking place tomorrow, where Nad will be also speaking. And we also had a chat with Nad before, and I already have some interesting things that I think it's super cool to discuss today, starting from your childhood when you started your creative career by just checking vinyl covers and scanning them, doing with them something on Photoshop. I actually have some vinyl covers here. We could take one of them. Then you were at 18 already in e-commerce, building like something very massive. After that, you were building games for millions of, like 50 millions of users. And now you're head of design at Lovable, which is like, wow, this is trajectory, like fantastic. But probably I missed something. So you can better introduce yourself and how do you share who you are today?
So I'm Nad. I lead design at Lovable. And so at Lovable, I joined super early when there was just a handful of us. And they've basically taken us from pre-product and almost pre-team in some sense to where we are today. Prior to that, I think we wanted to dig into where it all began, right? Like the original sort of design streak even. For me, I started designing when I was a kid, basically. And so when I was literally 5 or 6 years old, in the house, we had a flatbed scanner, which was this old scanner you could use to scan photos in. And it wasn't big enough to scan in like album artwork and like vinyl artwork. And so what I used to do was I'd grab these like vinyl sleeves that would be this big and then scan them in 2 or 3 times over. And then in Photoshop, try to stitch them together like as perfectly as possible. And like for me, this was just like fun. It was like, it's raining outside. I don't want to be outside. This is more interesting. And then just over time, like lots of different things kind of merged together, I think for me. So I grew up just like very interested in computers, also very interested in music. So I grew up playing guitar. And at some point, I started making websites for either for like myself or like for friends who are musicians and things like that. And then that escalated into building websites for local businesses. And then, as you were saying, I had a sort of a breakout professionally when I was around 18, where I led e-commerce for the UK's largest musical instrument retailer. And I was able to sort of land that job. Actually, I dropped out of university for it.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Wait for it.
Ended up leading e-commerce for this huge retailer that was great at retail, but quite bad at like the internet generally, just from merging these different passions. And so I was completely obsessed with guitars and music equipment and studio equipment and things like this. And at the same time was completely obsessed with just creating things for the web. And so sticking those two things together felt quite intuitive actually at the time. And then it's basically from there where I sort of had this moment where I was like, oh, people are willing to pay me to do this. Like, okay, that's a good sign. And then sort of built my career from there pretty much.
Wow. So first of all, you said you had some sort of career breakdown at 18. I think that's interesting. A lot of people at 18, they just don't have a clue what they're going to do, including myself, to be honest. And it's super interesting to dive deeper into that element of your life, like how you decided to drop university, why. I was actually reading this book, which is called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. She's known not only just by Love, Pray, and Eat book, but also Big Magic. And she said there, like, instead of saving money, taking loans for school, which is very expensive, just go and put yourself into the world.
Yeah.
This is something that you did. Why? What happened? What was happening in your brain that time?
So actually, in hindsight, in some ways, it was a little bit boneheaded or short-sighted. And I'm going to reveal my age here as well. So when I was in my second year of university, or end of my first year, we had to create a website as like one of our projects. And roughly when I was building that project, Gmail came out, like the very first version of Gmail. And with Gmail came this new JavaScript library called Ajax, which was the first time you could refresh the information on a page without reloading the whole thing. And so I tried to use Ajax in my university coursework. And my professor was basically like, you can't do that. Like it's not on the syllabus, not on the curriculum. You literally just can't use this. And for me, it was just crazy. I was like, the user experience is obviously so much better. And so not being able to use that kind of bleeding edge technology made me think, is university the best environment for me? Because up until that point, most of my learning had been self-learning as well. And so actually structured institutional learning felt unintuitive to me. And then when I joined, I was like, joining to learn the things I didn't know. But I felt that I was learning the things I didn't know in a kind of suboptimal way as well, basically. And so yeah, it was really down to Gmail actually that sort of convinced me to drop out.
Before we go deeper, I want to take a moment to thank a few tools that are supporting this season of Growthmates. These are tools I use in my work and recommend to clients, so checking them out is actually one of the best ways you can support the show. First one, Mobbin. Mobbin has been my number one product inspiration source for years. Whenever I'm working with clients or designing a new activation flow, I literally start by checking how top products solve similar problems. Mobbin has thousands of real flows: Figma, Airbnb, Duolingo, and more. And for this season, I curated a special Upgrades Flows collection, which you can browse completely for free. The link is in the description. Second one, Obi by Core. This one really changed how I think about onboarding. Instead of boring tooltips, Obi creates a personalized onboarding call with an AI assistant that feels almost human. It adapts to you, asks questions, guides you like a trainer, and honestly, it's the first onboarding experience in years that really surprised me. If you're working on activation or education, I really recommend trying Obi. So, if you want to support me, the podcast, and the creators building these amazing tools, all the links are waiting for you in the episode description. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Thanks, Gmail, for releasing what you have released. How many years ago, probably.
Yeah.
Cool. That's fantastic. And, probably there are some people who are listening to us who are a little bit stuck to the traditional expectations or doing things the right way. Like, all right, there is a trajectory. You need to finish university, then study this, and then take that particular job, and then do this, and then wait till that happens before you can do something on your own. What would you tell to these people who are a little bit under these expectations or limiting beliefs of our society?
I think you can just genuinely, if you're working in tech and if you're building something digitally, especially now with AI, you can do anything. And I mean that quite genuinely. Like AI has its limits and it has its pitfalls, but it can get to 80% good enough in most things. And so if you think about something you want to do, and traditionally all the different disciplines you'd have needed to be good at to even do a first version of something, you can just build things and you can just do things now, end to end. And so I think it requires a more of an ownership mindset, which I think is actually a very good amount of people. And so if you have that ownership mindset, I think it's incredibly liberating and embracing. But I also, even in my personal circle, I have friends who it's not that they don't have an ownership mindset, but they enjoy being, one part of a team, or they really enjoy their environment being more structured. And so I think it's worth a bit of like introspection to figure out, are you somebody who enjoys being very structured, or are you somebody who wants to just carve your own path? And if you want to carve your own path, I think there's you can basically start and do anything. Like more or less, there's zero limits.
This is so interesting. And I think people who are exploring what they need to study right now are very on crossroads, because there are no like up-to-date probably universities that can teach you the things that you really need. And I don't know what, I don't even know what I would tell to them. Probably you still need to study if you want to have a degree in something, if it depends on your path. But what would be other elements to self-study? Maybe you have done it for a while, let's say, for the whole career. And how did you self-study it actually?
Yeah, so it's weird. So today actually really reminds me of like roughly when like Web 2.0 exploded itself. So when I was in secondary school, like just finishing high school, it was roughly when Wikipedia exploded. And the entire education system was like, don't trust it, you can't use it, like all of this stuff. And at the same time, every old media company was trying to embrace like new media and like internet media. And if you asked a newspaper, or if you asked a traditional news station, like, what do you think about this internet thing? They would say, oh, we have journalistic integrity, we have editorial processes, we understand what people want, it's just another medium, just another screen or whatever. And they were they had kind of tunnel vision on like what would be possible with the internet, because they came from it. They were almost inhibited by their own experience and their own success. And sort of in parallel, you had companies and people who were internet native that would just completely run away with things in new directions that nobody was imagining whatsoever. And like actually today feels quite similar. And so my urge would be try to be like AI native, I think, in how you approach things. And then honestly, just play with it. Like treat everything, either learning or AI itself as like a playground and as a tool, and just play with it and then just see what happens. And just by the sheer nature of doing that, the same way like web native companies had a complete advantage over media companies. If you are more AI native today, you'll just have an inherent advantage over people with more experience, frankly, as well.
And I think one thesis that resonates is like, just play, right?
Yeah.
So just treat your career playfully. And your example with like vinyl cover scanning reminded me about my time of also exploring Photoshop decades ago when I was a kid. And I started Saturday by that. I woke up earlier just to turn on my computer and do something in Photoshop. It felt so inspiring that time. So I think we miss that sometimes when we get older, when we go into traditional jobs and just become stuck and, led by norms.
Yeah.
So getting back to your, how you call this, breakdown at 18 years old, career breakdown. What happened after that? You moved to Asia to do something else. How did that happen? Can we get back in time to that moment? And how was it for you? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there was a lot of serendipity, shall I say? Just like things happened at the right time, and so a bit of luck being created that created some kind of fortunate circumstance. But essentially, I dropped out of uni around 18, did e-commerce for a few years, scaled that to 7 figures basically over the course of a couple of years. Wasn't really building tech. Like what I wanted to do was like build new technology. Whereas like e-commerce, it was very much, you take things off the shelf and then you customize them. And then so I actually went to Asia on what I thought would be a 3-month-long holiday. But when I got there, I landed in Beijing because I had a family friend basically who lived there and was crashing with them. But when I got there, I basically discovered a startup ecosystem, which I just completely did not expect. And so I ended up spending 7 years in total, so around 3 years in Beijing and 3 years in Hong Kong, working on massively multiplayer online games. And so building first-person shooters for social networks and for mobile, where They basically went completely viral in some quite specific markets. So like the Philippines and Taiwan were like really, really big, but just learned a lot about, also grew up playing games. And so like getting to design them for about 6 or 7 years was super fun as well.
That's cool. And I'm not into that domain at all, but my husband is diving into this industry his whole life. And he's telling me these wild stories, like how these games being released and how this teamwork like works. And it's a lot of passion there. Is it like they're telling us, or it's a bit different inside?
No, for sure. It's like, it's very, I think you only work in gaming if you really want to work in gaming. So it definitely comes from a place of passion. And also your users are completely fanatical. Like you make decisions that feel quite small to yourself. You're like, oh, I'm cleaning up our color palette. I'm going to change from this shade to that shade or whatever. But if it's somebody who's completely fanatical and obsessed with the game that you make, it's actually their entire world. It's their like, it's where they meet their friends. It's their like community. It's all these things all together. And so like super intense actually, and like a lot of pressure in the industry. So like ugly parts in terms of people do it out of passion. So like hours, intensity, work-life balance, whatever is like really not great compared to tech. So that's not great. But a lot of pressure also just from, you end up putting a lot of pressure on yourself because you know how much it means to other people as well.
Yeah, and I'm also curious, like at this point, we already talked about several quite pivotal decisions that you've made, like dropping out the university, then taking a pretty huge risk with like quite responsible type of job at 18 years old, then living to another continent, like just moving countries, also like changing industries. Like looking back at these risky decisions, which one you feel was the main, like most important and most pivotal that really paid off?
I think for me, it was actually dropping out of university because it proved that the things I thought I could do, I could actually do. So it definitely comes from a place of passion. And also your users are completely fanatical. Like you make decisions that feel quite small to yourself. You're like, oh, I'm cleaning up our color palette. I'm going to change from this shade to that shade or whatever. But if it's somebody who's completely fanatical and obsessed with the game that you make, it's actually their entire world. It's their like, it's where they meet their friends. It's their like community. It's all these things all together. And so like super intense actually, and like a lot of pressure in the industry. So like out in the real world. And so trusting my own instincts and like then what like the next good moves are basically.
And if I can ask you, like a lot of people at that point in their life, they are under some expectations of their family, of the society. Did it have an impact on you, or you had this freedom to decide what you can do with your life at this point?
Yeah, I had not only freedom, but I'd say support as well. And so like credit to my mum, actually, where it's due. Like she'd made a few bold decisions in her life as well. And so I think actually growing up as a first generation immigrant, if you have immigrant parents who've been through a lot, even just to get to square one in a new country themselves, it sort of creates a good kind of risk-taking environment, I think, as well.
That's beautiful. And what was happening after this chapter of Asia? Did you move back? Why? Or you stayed longer there?
Yeah, so I did a few years in Beijing and then a few years in Hong Kong. Each time trying to figure out, like, is this for me? And basically realized that I wasn't going to grow old in either of these places. So I started to ask myself where that would be. And so after Hong Kong, I had always put Silicon Valley on a pedestal. And so I had to go, in my head, I had to go there to see what's up. And so I ended up doing about a year and a half on and off on the West Coast, trying out a few different places, but then basically figured out that Silicon Valley wasn't for me. And so then came back to Europe. And so spent like a year and a half building design tools actually in Silicon Valley. It's like a motion design tool called Haiku, which was like Basically jitter pre-jitter, but jitter is way better than what we were doing as well.
Cool.
Like we were too early and we got a few things wrong, basically. But that was super fun. But figured out the US wasn't for me, and then decided to move back to Europe, and then did around 7 years building messaging apps just before joining Lovable as well.
Sure, we will talk about Lovable. So if you came here just to listen to stories about Lovable, we will get there.
Yeah.
But I'm here to listen to stories about Nad, because you can find Lovable stories everywhere. They are everywhere right now, literally. Curious, you said like Silicon Valley was a dream. You came there, realized it's not for you. Why? What was the breakdown again, or some realization that it's not for you?
Yeah, for me it was more of a monoculture than I liked. And so I gain a lot of energy from doing quite diverse things on the weekend, or even just having friends that do like lots of different things. Like I enjoy, hearing from different perspectives, or like, I don't know, I was talking to a friend last week who's an architect, and he was telling me about like a problem he's having with his internally between the architects and the civil engineers. And like we were comparing notes between that and like how we work cross-functionally with like product design and engineering, or like whatever. And so I felt like in Silicon Valley, like there was one archetype, and it was I work in tech, and that's it. And so that was quite unfulfilling. I'd say like more on the like outside of work hours side. And then otherwise, I also felt a bit of, I think it's a cultural divide, but I felt a bit of insincerity around how everybody would pitch themselves as changing the world. But like literally everybody. And everybody has like a real sort of sense of importance around themselves, which I actually think we can learn from a lot. Like I wish that, I don't know how things are when you were growing up, but in the UK, instead we put each other down, which is like, that has other problems, and like everyone's quite like pessimistic, which is another issue.
This is similar to my original culture.
Right. So the optimism is great, but what I didn't enjoy was the sense that like every single thing everybody was doing was really important, and they were the most important person in the room almost. Yeah. And that's completely non-representative of everyone there. And I also made some really great friends there that I kept in touch with. But again, coming back to this question of, after doing a year or so, I was like, do I want to grow old here? And the answer was no again. And so hence coming back to Europe.
By the way, if you are new here, besides making this podcast, I also help companies grow meaningful products through Growthmates. My whole career, I've been balancing between user needs and business goals. And the biggest truth I've learned is this: what is good for the user is also good for the business. Over the last 8 years, from Miro to supporting over 25 teams, I've collected a lot of practical frameworks that actually work. And now there are 3 ways I share them. First, my POG advising program. This is where I work closely with your team to build a sustainable, user-centric growth system, not just experiments. Second, the onboarding design sprint. It's a short, focused collaboration to fix activation and redesign the first-time experience. Many teams see a real uplift very fast. And third, my course, User-Centric Product-Led Growth in the AI Era. It's a 3-week intensive where we turn a real challenge into a clear growth roadmap. People from Miro, Dropbox, Atlassian, Loom have already taken it, and for podcast listeners, there is a discount with the code Growthmates. If you want to explore any of these, everything is on growthmates.club, and the link is in the episode description. And if someone on your team might benefit, feel free to share it. And now let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, and I'm also like, actually, I had similar dream, like, probably every human being growing up, like with ambition, have like living outside where things happen. I was in Russia, like very far away. So I was dreaming of US as well. But after living in Europe for almost 4 years already, I feel like how culturally it's more rich, fulfilling. For example, I came here for a week for just 4 days. And yesterday I already have been in one museum. Today I will have a gallery night. Tomorrow we will have both Hatch and Spatial Fest. So a lot of cultural activities, people with different interests, not just tech people. And I think for us as creators, if we can name ourselves like that, it's important to be in an environment that supports your diversity in a way. That's very, very nice. Then you got back, you worked in tech companies already here in Europe, and then you joined the most interesting chapter that we are waiting for, Lovable, as a founding designer. First, I will not talk a lot about Lovable here, but I'm wondering about your role there, about your culture there, about your mindset, because I'm more curious, what's the mindset of people who are building this thing so other listeners can take something from that, can try something, right, while building their companies, course, products, whatever they want. And you were founding designer, which is super interesting role. And like you've mentioned in one of the episodes that I listened to, that it's a lot about generalist mindset, which I love. I probably define myself also with the generalist mindset. And you also mentioned that specialism puts people in a box. So why do you think this is happening, and what do you mean by generalist mindset? Maybe also sharing a little example of how your role as a founding designer looks like.
So I'm smiling because I gave a talk last week that was basically a 20-minute rant on this topic. Yeah. And it was a very thorough rant almost. And so I can give you the shorter version rather than the 20-minute version.
Take your time. We have time.
But so I realized maybe in the middle of my career that I would work with other designers who were way better at me at certain things. And it used to frustrate me. And so, for example, I've never been good at using pen tools. And so I'm really bad at like drawing anything in vector. I just always have been, zero idea why, it just doesn't work with my brain. So when it comes to things like drawing custom iconography, I'm just terrible. And so I would work with people who are amazing at this. And sort of when I was mid-career, let's say like 5 to 6 years in, I would be like, am I a bad designer because I just can't do this? And they're amazing at it. And I could see the bar that they had. And so I, roughly at that point in my career, I had a really good conversation with a guy called Stephen Olmsted, who was at Envision, if you remember when Envision was like all of the rage, and he was doing community work at Envision. And I booked a call with him, I think, to try and suss out some work or like a job or something. And I was just trying to put out feelers. And I basically said to him, like, hey, so you've been a designer for like 10 years, and then now you do like community at a design company. How did you navigate that, or what was your decisions, or like how did that come about? And what he said was that he realized that he was like a B+ at everything. And so he's like a B+ at everything, but he's really good at communication and he's really, really fast, is like what he said. And like that actually left quite a big impression on me. I was like, actually, I think that's me as well. Like I'm basically very good at most things, and I'm also very good at, balancing craft and speed. But I'm also never going to hit the craft bar on like these few things that other people do. And so I've like very deliberately been a generalist, I'd say, for probably the majority of my career. And as I've worked in larger teams, like for me, it's more a case of figuring out who the specialists are, and then I can kind of lean on them. So that's kind of like one sort of philosophy I've always carried forwards. But otherwise, you were also asking like, how did we get here as well? So I have a few pet theories on this. So I think 2 different things happen at the same time. The first thing is, as an industry, we started to introduce overly specialized thinking. And so you think about like design thinking versus product thinking, and how you build almost like culture, for want of a better word, around like product managers going to these conferences to talk about these methodologies versus designers reading these books about design sprints or whatever, when the reality is we're all just problem solving and we're all just thinking and like solving problems. So I think on the one hand that happened. And so there's a few sort of key things. Like if you look at, I think the Agile Manifesto that basically gave birth to product management as a discipline. And then you look at other sort of key things around design thinking and all the rest. And I think we just end up with a bunch of specialisms as a result of that. And the other thing is hiring. And so I think with all of the good intention of the world, companies are like, we want to invest in people, so we need to grow them. In order to grow them, we need to set expectations of how they'll grow. And then you end up with these tracks, right? Where it's like, as an IC, you'll grow this way, as a manager that way, 4 different IC tracks for these different flavors of design, et cetera, et cetera. And so what company A does this, company B is like, well, we want to hire from that company. And they're kind of wondering why their friends are called senior staff, whereas they're only called senior. And you end up with this A, like title inflation, but B, you end up with companies copying each other because you want to hire from each other. And then what you end up with is design by consensus. And so every company is racing to the bottom on having some like good enough frameworks, and then you hire people into them. And then what happens is everyone ends up completely pigeonholed. And you end up very much like, okay, if you're a staff designer or senior designer at this level, at this company, you will do this. And we'll have 5 people around you. And then as a team, you will do this. And I think it's an okay way to scale teams. If you're optimizing something, like if you have something that's working and you want to create a reliable machine, I think it's an okay way to do things. But I don't think it's the best way to work. And so where I feel super passionate is like that generalists can do a lot. And also that I just trust that really smart people can do multiple things. Like, I just don't think you need to turn up somewhere and be basically told that like, you'll only focus on this and someone else will focus on that. And so we try to play a lot with trying to empower the smallest amount of people possible to carry things end to end, but also try and create a culture that's where you know your blind spots and you know your limits and you therefore know when to bring in like an expert on the specific things.
This is interesting. And it reminds me about your titles even at Lovable. Like Elena says that she's growth stuff. You said a while ago, just design stuff, like all stuff. And it's sort of about your maybe ownership in a broad term rather than a title. And it's interesting, like we will dive into your culture a little bit as well. I think getting back to the theme of creators, what resonates a lot is your mission, right? In Lovable, the mission is very, very tightly connected to that idea. Like you're trying to enable anyone to become a creator of any type of software they can imagine, which is wow. So at the same time, I think it's changing the definition of creator. Who can be a creator? Who is a creator? And what are your, thoughts about that? What are you excited about? And what maybe worries you as well? If there is something that worries you in terms of giving so much freedom to everybody.
Yeah, I think, so I'll maybe use a metaphor or like a parallel to draw from. And it's not, and when I talk about worries, it's not something I worry about, but I'm maybe going to say the thing out loud that nobody normally says. But it really reminds me where we are today with like vibe coding in general, like really reminds me of like early days of YouTube. And so like pre-YouTube, it was actually quite difficult to film a video, put it online, share it with people, then be able to view it, or quite difficult to discover new video content that was outside of your immediate friend circle or like whatever. And so what happened with YouTube is like actually the first couple of years of YouTube, the quality wasn't that great. Like 99.9% of videos that get uploaded would get like 3 views, probably quite correctly. But what happens is you basically change absolutely everybody's expectations, what they can do. And quantity goes completely through the roof. And you have like millions of people doing something that they just had never really done before. And then that doesn't happen at the best quality. It's not like any of these videos are going to win an Oscar or anything like that, but the videos exist and They didn't exist before at all. So that's already a big win. And then slowly over time, I think what happens is you end up building not just new culture, but also subculture. And so if I look at YouTube now, it's like, okay, incredible content around education or incredible niche content around basically anything you can imagine. And I think all of that's a really, really wonderful thing. But it took however many years of like everybody uploading anything of any quality before you really get those second and third order like effects, more or less. And so like with vibe coding, I mean, I actually think we're over this now, but let's say over the winter just gone, I felt like we were in that first year of YouTube a little bit. It was like there was millions of people doing this.
Yeah.
And there was honestly some open questions around like, are people going to be creating things of enduring value? Or is it going to be this kind of flash in the pan thing? But since, I'd say for us, since probably January, February, I'd say, we started to see some really interesting enduring behaviors and like really interesting enduring projects. So everything from one person who's non-technical building a one person startup that's now doing 50 to 100K a month on their own, through to of which we know of at least hundreds of people that fit this profile now, which is absolutely insane. This would have been unthinkable only a year ago. So there's everything from that's very like bottoms up indie almost kind of movement. And on the complete other spectrum, we have, for example, there's a Brazilian education platform that's several hundred people as a company. They've been around for about 10 or 12 years. One person at this company spent 2 weeks building something on their own that's basically a new product line. They put it live and they sent out an email newsletter to their existing users and did $3 million in revenue in 48 hours, like in the opening weekend. And so we're really seeing like independent people do things they could just never do before, both on the small scale of like, I can build my own business and build my own startup, and I never thought that would be possible, but also like bigger companies as well who are like, if they're agile enough, they can also ship new interesting things as well.
This is so cool that you brought this YouTube example, because now I'm looking at these top YouTube creators like, I don't know, Jay Shetty, hello, my favorite podcast, like all these awesome people who build wealth on that, but also a lot of value to the community. That wouldn't be possible without such a platform. While with Lovable, it's similar. It's also a platform that gives people like possibility to create things in a way that is just new, have never happened before. And you like brought a couple of interesting examples. Maybe you have some other on top of your mind things that maybe you created or some of your teammates or you have seen from the community that you felt like really meaningful. Like it's not like yet another website on like, I don't know, selling whatever they want to sell, but something cool and unobvious if you have something like that.
Yeah, I think, so there's one use case which, if I'm honest, when we first started, I thought that personal software was going to be huge. And so people creating one-off software just for themselves. It's turned out to be less of a use case than we thought. But the people that I talk to who are building personal software, and I think when I look back over like 10, 20 years even, like this is what will feel the most enduring to me, are actually people who are neurodivergent. And so we have calls with people where they're like, I'm on the spectrum, I have ADHD, every single calendar app, every single notes app I've ever used my entire life has never worked for me. It just doesn't work for my brain. And they're able to make something for themselves that just does. They're just like, they can tune it exactly to whatever they need in every single way. And like, this is huge. And it's like, it's surprisingly niche because I think the far majority of the planet would rather consume rather than create just for themselves. Maybe similar to something like music, right? It's like, again, there's like a very limited amount of people that create for everyone else to consume. But then obviously you do have home musicians, hobby musicians, and smaller musicians and all the rest. So it's almost that kind of dynamic. But yeah, like personal software for people who are neurodivergent is like incredible. Like it's so wild to me and just so amazing that, this is possible. And then, yeah, like other examples, maybe like we use it a lot for like quirky internal tools, basically. And so like one that I built last week was, I don't know if you've ever had to run like an all hands for a company or like do a presentation for like hundreds of people where every single slide platform is really bad for having multiple presenters. You end up with one person streaming and everyone's like, next slide, and they have to call. It's super awkward. And so I built this little mini app where you can basically paste in a Google Slides link, and then that inputs it into or it shows it in an iframe. but then I built loads of like multiplayer features around it. And so there can be like, for us, about 10 different hosts. They can control the slides. It gets synced to everyone's screens. And then one person can stream that for everybody else to be able to watch, basically. And so, we just build little things like that as well all the time.
When you explain that, it sounds pretty complex. And I'm like, oh no, I cannot imagine a prompt that would just create stuff like that. But it's already quite functional. It's interesting stuff. And what you said, like people are creating for themselves. This is how most of the companies started, right?
Yeah.
Mira real-time board started when the founding team was just in front of this limited physical whiteboard, and they were, whoa, it doesn't work for us anymore. Let's do it online, digital version of the whiteboard. So simple, just for internal usage for agency.
Right.
They didn't even want to share it with anybody else. And then, okay, it feels like not just us having this problem of limited physical whiteboard. So I think there is a potential in that. And also more people become creators, right? So creators in a way of creating some piece of software. So do you see that more people are interested now in this path of maybe being an indie maker, creator, building the software? As you said, like there are stories of people building some revenue from that, sustainable revenue. Maybe they want to leave their jobs at some point and become more independent. And how do you feel internally about that in terms of the mission that you're driving? Because it might be a little bit controversial. You're a team, small, but still you're a team. And there are maybe some bigger teams and corporations that are not that modern in a way that are allowing their employees do whatever they want, do the side gigs, do side projects. So a lot of restrictions like that. What do you think will be shifting in the industry in a way, or should be shifting in a way, with tools like Lovable enabling everybody to become a business owner, basically?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would love there to be more designer founders. There's so many people that I know and meet all of the time where there's an implicit ceiling to what they can do. And they're normally they fall in love with the craft and, the work itself. But the reality is that you join a company, you're in a team, you have your scope that's limited. Even if you have this perfect vision, you implement 70% of it, then it gets scoped down, and then you're competing priorities, et cetera. Whereas I think you can create something in your own vision now. And so I'd love there to just be more designer founders, in general, and more founders in general. So that I feel very strongly about. And, as we were saying earlier, that AI can basically do most things. And it's I think more people should lean on to this idea of AI being your co-founder. And so it can do all the things you don't want it to do. And maybe just acknowledge the limits of it and don't expect it to be perfect. But 80% of perfection is still pretty good. And so where can you lean on it to do the things that either you can't or you don't want to? And so I think a lot about founders and would love there to be more designer founders. And more industry-wide, I think, honestly, I think it's quite early to tell, but what I find really interesting is if I go to a product management conference, everyone at the conference is saying AI can code now, so therefore we need more product managers. If I go to an engineering conference, the engineers are saying AI can code now, so now we can spend more time on product thinking. We need less product managers. If I go to a design conference, people are well, now we don't need the handoff or whatever. And I think it's super early to tell what's going to happen. But my bold bet is that new teams and more pioneering teams will be way smaller and will have way blurrier lines cross-functionally. And I think big companies will take a while, but I think there'll be this, they'll slowly move to more of this model as well.
Wonderful. You mentioned design founders, and I think in the previous episodes and previous seasons, I've had several of them. Maybe some names come to your mind, who are these people who we can follow, maybe look at what they are doing?
Yeah, so I mean, so what's really sad is I was looking the other day and I think the only designer founder in the FTSE 500 is Nad Chishtie at Airbnb, which is
pretty well known.
Pretty well known. And considering that design is everywhere and everything,
oh my God.
That's kind of crazy, right?
Exactly.
So, Yes, I mean, like big companies, it's hard to pull from. I really like what Ben Blumenrose is doing, who's at Designer Fund. So he's got a design-focused VC fund.
Yeah, I know this one. I'm a part of their community. Yeah.
Cool. And so I think like following him is like a really good start in terms
Cool.
of he's like constantly trying to sort of empower like the next generation or like this generation of designer founders. And yeah, and honestly, I aside from maybe the obvious ones around like you have your like I think is it Kari, pronounce his name, who founded Linear, and so on. There's like maybe a handful where it's like, you know, very successful founders who are designers, but I struggle to name, and that's the problem.
That's the problem, but we will see them in a year or so. I fingers crossed. And getting back to your culture at Lovable and how you do things, how you create things, you mentioned on one of the episodes that you rebuilt Lovable 3 times or like several times from scratch. How did that happen? I have never met probably a person or a company who have done it at least even once or 3 times in such a short period of time. It's like 1 year or so. What was the mindset behind these bold changes?
Yeah, so one of the things that's non-obvious until we kind of lived it was that if AI makes it quicker to create things, it also empowers you to delete things as well. Because you've gone from this old world of, you know, you spec things, you create them, it takes a long time, and you have all this sunken cost. When you have something, you're kind of like, well, we spent a long time doing that, so we don't want to change it, we don't want to remove it. Whereas we felt like we could take some quite bold decisions because we trusted our ability to like delete and rebuild, basically. So that was kind of one driving force behind all of it, where we just felt very empowered and very confident in our ability to move quickly and to be able to build things. And the other thing, which was unexpected, I think, or at least unexpected for me, was every single time we tried to use a new frontier model. So let's say OpenAI or Claude or Google would come out with something. We couldn't just plug and play. We couldn't just swap the model and be like, okay, that's it, we've tried the model. We had to completely re-architect the user experience as well as the kind of knowledge that we give the AI, as well as the entire chain of thought that we kind of build the product around. And so we had to actually, anytime we wanted to play with a new model or with a new approach, we had to basically almost delete and then restart across all of those things at the same time. And so you couldn't create a GPT-4 version of Lovable and just go Claude in, GPT out, Claude in. We had to like re-architect the whole thing and rebuild the user experience for the whole thing. Because even the other thing that's really frustrating actually is whenever you see these AI benchmarks, they're always against tests made by engineers that never take into account latency as well. And so you can't just have a model and say it has better reasoning if it takes 30 seconds to respond rather than 2 seconds. The user experience doesn't work. And so we were playing around with all these variables of like, how deep do we make the reasoning? What's the latency? Because we want it to feel like a creation tool, like you're genuinely creating something new with it. And what's the user experience for that specific model as well? It was like, we just had to play with all of that at the same time.
Well, yeah, that sounds like a lot of complex thinking at the same time. But you also interestingly mentioned, I remember when I was listening to this episode, that you're trying to cut overhead, something like that, quoting. And it means that probably you're bringing more space for more interesting creative work than as a small team. So how does that look like? Because I've been probably in different modes in my career. There was a very creative mode when the company was smaller, then there was a bit boring mode. When it becomes bigger, you have just endless meetings. How does it look like in your case? What does it mean cutting overhead, and what others maybe can do to cut overhead?
Yeah, have you seen this? It's like this thing that gets reposted. It's almost a meme that somebody says something like, I don't want AI to do my creative work. I want it to do my laundry or something like that. Like we basically think about AI the same way in terms of if something can be automated with AI and it's something that we'd rather not spend manual time doing, then we'll try and do that. And if we can succeed, then that frees ourselves up for like the things where we think we can do that more uniquely, individually and as humans, basically. And so like what that means in practice is all the designers code, actually. We try to systematize things so that if we can create a system around it, then we don't have to think about it again. And then we just try to apply ourselves the most where we feel that it's things that only we could uniquely do. And so generally that's things like figuring out some bigger strategic bets. And so like where is it we want to play all together? Talking to users. Like we can't, I haven't tried any of these like AI-based user research things where you talk to an avatar or something. There's something about it that just doesn't, I'm not quite there yet personally. And so we try to spend our time on, that kind of stuff, as well as really just validating the decisions that we're making pretty much as possible with users.
Wonderful. I love hearing that you're on that side that still talking to humans and like just, validating the product with real humans. Because I would say even if someday it can be automated, it doesn't worth it. It's so great to have real human conversations like we do right now. And I think someday AI will replace so many things, but we should be mindful about what we don't want it to be to replace.
Yeah.
So a lot of creative work can be now replaced if you let it, if you delegate it to AI. So for example, I'm writing newsletter. Of course, I'm using AI to edit it, to fix my spelling. I'm not a native speaker, I'm sorry. But sometimes it starts generating stuff for me. And then I feel, oh my God, I'm not in my flow anymore.
Yeah.
I was in my flow writing this stuff. Now it just created this. I feel like I'm not good enough because I was slower, 100 times slower. And then next time I'm thinking, should I even start writing or should I ask AI? So it happened to me once. After that, I said, no, the writing is my creative process.
Yeah.
If you want it, if you enjoy it, it's like an artist. If you want to create visual art, you will create it regardless of AI tools. And I'm not a pro vibe coder. I'm just a bit on the different spectrum. But when you were doing this vibe coding stuff, did you feel some moments when it interrupted your flow, or what should be the approach there that it feels like creative? It doesn't feel like you give it some prompts and it just creates somehow, and it takes the most interesting part of your job. Or it feels the opposite in real situation.
Yeah, I mean, I do less of it now, but I used to really be into photography, and I used to be. I still am a huge cinematography nerd, and so love films and the process behind them as well. And the way that I think about it is, I try to think about designing with AI the same way a cinematographer does around getting the perfect shot, where it's okay, you're going to be quite structured around what's the lighting, what's the equipment, and what's the shot, and working with other people, trying to figure out what's the emotional response or the emotional feeling you want from this, etc. However, you're holding this camera and you've got the viewport, and it's on you to figure that out. And so I try to think about things through that lens. And the other reason why I find it empowering to think about things through this lens is that things happen out of your control as well. And so if you are shooting a film and, I don't know, the actors go off script or the lighting hits this very specific way, and then, something unexpected happens, but it's actually, incredibly beautiful, or it's the thing that you want, but you didn't plan for it. That's great. And you should embrace this environment of, creating this environment for unexpected things to happen, but then you're there to kind of capture it. And so I think one of the biggest mistakes I see people making is they put a lot of pressure on themselves to be perfect. So they're I want to be good at AI, so I'm therefore going to learn about prompt engineering, and I'm going to read all these things about best practices or whatever. So that happens on the one hand. And then secondly, they then see the AI's first version of something, the first response, and they're that's not good enough, next. Whereas what I prefer to do, or what I try to do, is be very unstructured with what I give any AI whatsoever, try to get a lot of output out of it, but then almost treat it as the the photographer looking at all of the cutting
Shots, yeah.
exactly, and you're a bit like, yeah, maybe yes, but maybe
so
no.
Interesting.
And then zooming in to something that resonates with me by doing that basically, and so.
Wow, this is so interesting. It gives you like this optionality and surprise effect at some point that you didn't expect this can come out, and a lot of fantastic creative work in the end revealed like that. It's like it wasn't expected, planned whatsoever, which is an interesting way to treat AI. And sometimes I feel this magic as well when you put it on this research mode, whatever, like deep thinking, go away, don't have a clue, and then come back and you see something interesting. And I think that is also a little more liberating to treat it like that and not to put it under control, like constant control. And I think that's interesting. That gives me an idea that maybe people who are now using AI, and we will all be using, it's unavoidable, need a little bit of not training, but more like inspiring guidance that will enable them to use it and not to be trapped by it, not to be super obsessed with it, because it's also like a bit, there is this AI fatigue. Yeah, you open any social media, you see it everywhere. You have to do many things with that. Instead of that, you want to talk to real humans. So it's good that we talked about that, and I think it gives me some inspiration to maybe consider that as a theme and unpack it in a way psychologically. Yeah, like how human brain operates with AI, what are the challenges it faces, and how to make it smoother. Like, because it's a behavioral design change that's happening. Like, we have never interacted with such an interface, and it's a new thing for us. And talking about that, when we met, you said that you also have a son, and thinking about next generations, let's be dramatic a bit, it will be absolutely different for them, right? And what are you maybe excited about? What you wish your son would have when he will be 18, that you didn't have that time? This Gmail situation, or maybe something else you wish to happen? How do you imagine this future?
Yeah, I mean, I like, if I look back on my own sort of career story, like I recognized early on that I hated programming, but that I really enjoyed problem solving for people, and that sort of naturally drew me towards design. And then I also realized that I really loved working with other people, and so it made sense to try and be a world-class designer in world-class teams, working with other people to do things. But I had a complete personal barrier on like ability to code, or like ability to like, solo found my own startup, or like whatever that might be. And there was just an inherent hard skill ceiling there. And like that won't exist anymore. And so I think that's very interesting. I think the fact that there'll be basically no limits on what anyone can create. And so therefore he'll be able to explore whatever he wants to. And so I feel like, today this probably already exists with your like Minecrafts or Robloxes of the world, where it's like within this environment, you can create things with these blocks and bricks or whatever. But you'll be able to do that with anything digital, like anything whatsoever. And so like that, or maybe even anything physical, depending on what happens with AI, like robotics as well. And so like that I find very exciting in general. And so,
wonderful. And thinking about yourself, like there is a lot of years ahead of you. So is there anything bold or like, interesting you would dream of building, doing, trying out in your life with all of these changes that are happening? People are thinking many opposite different ways. Like, I don't know, if AI will automate everything, maybe I will go and build a community, I don't know, garden, farm, whatsoever. Or even thinking, if AI exists, I can do maybe something more meaningful. So do you have something like you're thinking about, dreaming about like that?
I think if I could maybe go down two different paths here. So let's say that there's a lot of interesting things to do in tech. I'd love to play around more with AI personalization and figuring out how do you create truly personal computing that's genuinely individual for every single person, like on the planet, basically. So I think a lot about that generally, and also like with Lovable as well. And I also think about how interfaces are going to shrink, I think, generally speaking. And I think we're going to go into this world where your experiences will be really malleable to the situation that you're in. And so you could have the same core product or experience, but the way that you experience it on a phone versus audio only versus on a big screen or whatever. I think there's a lot of interesting things to figure out there. So on the tech side, it's probably that. If I were to not be working in tech, I think I'd be doing something in food actually. And so
Really?
yeah, I think I might go completely off the grid and try and do something bold with food, because I have a lot of friends who are in the food industry. I think it's endlessly interesting.
This is wonderful. And you know, you're not the first person. In this couple of days, I met a lot of people in tech world. As you can imagine, I'm doing things here in Hatch conference. And when we had this chat and I asked them similar question, a lot of people said either food, either community, eco house, because this is my dream. Then, you know, I think we will be capable to do both, you know,
Yeah.
and I think this is interesting. I wouldn't like, when I'm thinking about that, some people are scared by AI. They want, it will replace my job. What I'm going to do. So I have a plan B, but at the same time, I wouldn't feel enough, not utilized, but enough myself if I would be excluded from this cool tech world completely. And I think there is a possibility to do both in a way, and maybe even find an intersection somewhere, but without compromising one or another direction. So I think that makes me, like, as creators, I think the life of a creator is experimentation, like endless experimentation, trying out stuff, and the world is giving us tools for that.
100%. And for me as well, it's very like these different domains are exercising the same skills. And so, you know, everything that I know about like composition applies to digital design and music. And everything I know about balance applies to visual design as well as food and like et cetera, et cetera. And so like, I think it's, I think designers will be well placed to do lots of interesting things.
We're safe. Good news. We're safe.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm not sure if I can tell that, but the Wi-Fi password for this room is design not dead. So design is not dead. No worries about that. They will have to change the password, I think, afterwards. On that note, Nad, I think the last thing I would like to ask you as some sort of inspiration, additional thing for people who are listening to us, is there any advice you'd like to give to someone who's thinking about starting creating? Like, they have never done it before. They are scared. They are uncertain. They are like, everybody's telling them, no, go traditional way. So what you would tell them?
So I think for designers specifically, the number one problem that I see is people's perfectionism actually constraining them, where there's some bar in their head and they're like, unless it meets this bar, I'm not putting my ding in the universe or something like that. And they set themselves this completely impossible thing to achieve. Whereas like even just like good enough against that bar is still incredible compared to most of the things that exist in the world. And you do so much by, you know, putting something out there, even when it's imperfect, and putting it out there, learning from it, taking a second swing, iterating, realizing you're wrong, pulling it back, whatever. And so I think not letting perfectionism hold you back, I think is a really, really big one. And the other thing, whenever I talk to designers, is I think empathy generally can be a bit of a like double-edged sword. And so again, like I have friends who've experimented with things, but then they've done some user research and they found the signal for like why this won't work rather than you know, why it could. And so yeah, I think less perfectionism and more optimism would be really
Wonderful.
good.
And the last thing that you said, like why it didn't work for someone, sometimes makes you think that it will not work for you, but try to find someone for whom it really worked. Listen to some other episodes on Growthmates. Like I really try hard to find these people who did something that really worked. And sometimes it's better to listen to one story that really worked than 10 other that didn't work, just to feel the push inside, like just to give it a try. And I feel very inspired. Thank you, Nat, for this amazing conversation. And thanks everyone for listening. If you enjoyed that, please share what you think, share any thoughts, what resonated, what didn't. It really helps me to think about next guests, next seasons. And so thanks for being with the Growthmates. Share it with a friend if you have a friend who wants to create something. And by the way, I haven't asked you, Nat, where people can find you, where it's the best place to follow your stuff.
Yeah, sure. So on Twitter, on most things, or X rather, I'm Nadonomy, so Nadonomy. Or just search for Nad on LinkedIn, things like that. I think I'm the only Nad in most places. So
easy to find, to find. Yeah, so please follow Nad and follow Growthmates on any platform you're listening it to. Thanks for being with us today, and we'll see you in the next episodes.
Thanks for having me.